Yeah, so I'm programs producer at Creative Dundee, and I am just going to give you a wee perspective of how we practice collecting data and using it through a series of the example that Dylan just gave, but kind of wanted to give a wee introductions of what we came about with this this thing. So what is data looking like and how do we use it? So I'm interested in this idea that data can be used for goods, and there have been lots of examples already kind of given today, so that was really nice to hear. Sorry, I'm slightly nervous. I should just like kind of relax and be like, hey. I'm nervous because I don't have an academic presentation. I don't have lots of experience in use this data, but I just thought that it's still interesting to share experience of what we're doing. So yeah, when I hear data, this is what I see. I see something that is just numbers, spreadsheets. It's not easy to understand or to read or to use. And that, I think, is a lot of people have the same kind of common vision of it. And the previous speaker actually touched based on this idea that how to make it a bit more accessible and so that people can use it. And it's about empowering people with those informations. So this is actually some data that I've been collected and I've been put on the spreadsheet, and I'll show you how they look like visually later. And I'm saying that because for us, data looks a bit more like this. So it's less about numbers but more about what people have to say and what kind of feedback they're giving. So this is maybe not the best quote I took it, but this is from the research that we've been doing in the communities in Dundee. Yeah. And this is also, so Creative Dundee is all about, we really like touch in the way we're doing things. So we like just prototyping something, testing it, and then kind of doing, so it's always kind of small project. And that was an example of how we've been collecting data in one of our events. And the idea is to get that feedback look that we've been talking about this morning of like how that data can be directly shown to the people I've been collecting to. So with these pyramids and questions, people could see what were the most popular answers directly, so they didn't have to wait for a few months until we actually treated the data and visualized it for them. So that was just a really interesting way of doing a live audit within the room. And I'm saying that because when I've been looking at how we've been collecting data and how we've been using it, I realized that a lot of that we're doing is not about using an algorithm that gives us percentages and things like that, but actually using us as the machine. So using those data to make sense of it and give it back to the community. So that's just a few examples of the way that we've been doing it. So we've been crowdsourced a city guides to the city. The second example is about showing off the impacts that one of our events I've been doing, using a beautiful illustration, animation, kind of give us numbers and quotes. We're doing a lot of research with audience as well to always make sure that we understand what they want from us and what they see into our organization so that we can readjust what we're doing with them. And I guess the biggest examples was to actually build a strategy from information from people and from their knowledge and their aspirations and all of the bits of information that helps us kind of organize change. So I'm going to talk about a piece of research that we've done recently, and it was about looking at what culture means in the city and in citizen. So that's the research we've done in partnership with a project called Place Partnerships. And the idea is to kind of look at what are the cultural offer in the city, where are the gaps, and what people want. but we didn't want to assume that we knew what culture means to them, and we didn't want to use those words neither, so that it would direct their answer. And so we're looking at actually asking open questions, so that we will have a better idea of what culture means to people, what really matters to them, this idea of like, what is your perfect day? And that gives you data that are then difficult to analyze, obviously, because it's like this. And yeah, we kind of wanted to go away from the multi-choices label kind of thing, where you kind of limitate people's answer. So another thing that was important in this research as well is the idea of getting the information from the people that we want to get the information from. It's about going to the right places, and it's about going to the events that are already happening in the community, and not like making your own events, and going to the places where people go and engaging with them. So the way I've been doing that is that I've been to 10 different locations, been speaking to about 200 people, and I came with a big map of the city, and that kind of visual way of being like, hey, this is your playground, where do you like to go, what are your favorite places to go, was a really good way to engage with people and to start those meaningful conversations about what it means to them and how they spend their spare time, and what can we do to help make it that better. So yeah, this is some of the results. So one of the questions was, what are your favorite places to go in Dundee? And we were anticipating a lot of cultural venues or heritage venue into it, and then we actually realized that the love that people have for the green spaces, open spaces, viewpoints, urban features are much more kind of prominent. So that was those open questions that I was talking about earlier, really help us break those misassumptions that you have when you go and do a research. And that's another way of presenting the same data, but if you classify the thing differently, then you realize that actually heritage and culture come a bit higher just because you break down things. And that was the table that I showed you earlier as well. So that's the beautiful map that is online. And something really interesting that from this research as well is that we realized that culture and creativity doesn't just happen in the cultural dedicated venues. And a lot of places like the community spaces, but also the church and the schools and grandma's house are the favorite places of lots of people. And that is really important, and kind of, yeah, just this conscious, this vision that we have about culture, and when we're trying to provide cultural offer in the city, and then you're like, why are those people not coming to our free events? Well, maybe it's because it's not relevant to them. So that was some of the I tried to visualize all of the stories that I've been collecting in the communities. So you see what is your perfect day. It's all about going on walks, looking at the landscape, going to parks. You can see some of the beautiful features from the city as well. And yeah, and also what come up really well in that research, but it's not visible in a workload, is this idea that it's all about sharing those activities. It's not very much about where you're going and what you're doing, as long as you're doing it with your friends, your family, your schoolmates, and that you're really sharing those places and those activities with people. I just wanted to share that because it just kind of really show as well the kind of difference in terms of age. If you have the time, you just go and walk on Pretty Ferry. And if you're young, you're thinking about your friends. It's just funny. And the other questions they were asking is, how do you find out about these activities and how do you make them happen? And it was kind of looking at the barriers of involvement in cultural activities. And again, you can see how you rely so much in the World Month and friends. And so it's that social fabric that is really important when you're talking about culture and when you're talking about sharing this creativity that is happening in the city. And something a lot about local knowledge as well, which is people were so passionate about the city that as soon as you start getting them to speak, they will tell you so much about what's going on in the city, and they really want to share that that thing that is happening. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit now. This one was really interesting as well. Is there anything that could help? And you see that weather is quite permanent, but it actually doesn't mean that the weather is too bad here and we would want to be somewhere more in the south and with sun. What it tells you is that actually the activities that were put at example were outside. A lot of activity were set outside, so the weather was the first kind of condition of like to go and do those things. So it kind of, when it's sunny, then we'll take this opportunity to go and enjoy that. And then lots of other interesting ones. And that gives you also kind of an idea of like, well, when you have all the time in the world and you're in the city center, there's nothing that stops you to do the thing that you want to do. When you're working, well, the time. And then when you're not working, it's actually the accessibility of things. And it's not just about having a free entry to the museum, but it's also like how much the bus costs and how the line is, like how fast you get to those places and so on. So that thought was really interesting to kind of widen our what stops people from doing things. Sorry. But yeah, and a lot about awareness of what is happening, and a lot about the relevance of those activities as well, because we always assume that because it's free and because we would like it, then people would just come and enjoy it. But actually, a lot of the discussion that I had with the people was about the relevance of the contents of what it was offered culturally, and that's why we think that they might not engage, but actually they would if it was relevant to them. And something I didn't say as well is, well, I'll just continue and see if it comes. And then, because we always need an open questions for the future, is that one more and else you would like to see happening in the city. And again, is those words really brings for me this idea of shared activity and shared moments. It's about bigger scale events and festivals, so that we bring people together. There was a lot of discussions about mixing the crowds with cultures, ages, walk of life, and so on. And you could argue as well, because I mean, we're working in the creative industry, in the cultural sector, and we're like, there's lots of things happening already, guys. Like, stop saying that there's no things happening in the city. So I guess there's a question of like, is it, so I talked about the relevance of the contents that is on those events, but is also the awareness. I think like how the communications actually goes to those communities, and how do you make that content relevant to them. So yeah, that was also really interesting. So in conclusion to that research, I think what really helped us to do to not have those multiple choices questions, or to try to not label things or use words that would kind of reduce what we mean, is that it really challenges the definition of culture and creativity in the city, and activities like being with your family, with your friends, having a community group, football, things like that are very, very, very much into what we call culture, and that should be kind of kept there. And also, and again, it's something that I wasn't visible in my workloads and all of that, and it's all very much open to debates of like, how do you make all of those stories that you've been collected visible, and how do you even transmit that from one colleague to another? But the really beautiful sense that I got from that is that we need to use creativity and culture as a means to improve life and reduce inequality, and that is very much what was coming from those stories and those interviews and those kind of data that I got from it. So all of this data is actually accessible on the data Dundee City Gov website. So the City of Dundee have done this amazing initiatives to open their data to the public. So they have a lot of set of data that are accessible to the public to see. There's not lots to see, but especially to use. And I guess it always comes back to those questions of like, who has the tools and the knowledge to be able to use those data? But at least there's like a starting point of transparency, and because there are lots of interesting informations that citizens could be using to bring solution on the table and be part of that conversations with the politics. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. And I wanted to leave you with another example as well. A couple of weeks ago, I have been part of the Social Enterprise World Forum. And for those who doesn't know what a social enterprise is, I'll give a really simple definition, which I think is about running your business but with a social conscience. Social mission, so you're looking at what you're doing, you're not just looking at how you can make more money. And this is a beautiful example of a social enterprise that was given during that forum, and it's coming from New Zealand, and it's to give power to consumers and to use their data, their behavior, to give some kind of leverage of like, this is what we want as people, as communities, and as consumers, because the money that we spend is our power. So the way it works is that you sign up it's an app, it's really simple, it's an app, you sign up in an app, you put your card details in it. I know it's scary, but actually I think it's quite important, because that is I was arguing about the idea that data is not always numbers, but numbers are still very powerful, and the numbers that people hold and the most kind of powerful powers are the money that's spending. So the idea is that you sign up for this app, you hook up with your credit cards, and then you see the range of organizations that are in your area, and all of those organizations are choosing values that they are working on. So there's always some kind of certificates attached to that value. So it could be zero waste, it could be closing the waste circle, it could be a fair work, living wage, ecology, whatever values that are starting to pop into the way we consume. And then you as a consumers, you choose also your values. So you're giving information of what is the value that you want your local businesses to have so that they can develop into it. But it also give a number attached to it of like, where do you spend your money? And that is, I think, valuable data that can have some political impact. There you go, yeah.
Thank you.
There we go.